Welcome back to the Deep Dive. For years, we've really celebrated the incredible things artificial intelligence can do. But today, we're diving into maybe the most pressing questions surrounding this technology. Not just its potential, but its governance. Who gets to decide what AI should do, and maybe more importantly, how quickly?
Yeah, that's really the mission today, isn't it? We're aiming to guide you through the actual laws, the, high-stakes global debates, the immense financial and societal risks that are emerging, and crucially, the essential guardrails, things like mandatory kill switches and real human oversight that govern AI's deployment right now.
And it's happening so fast.
It really is. We have to acknowledge that AI is evolving so rapidly. Regulatory bodies worldwide are frankly struggling to keep pace. Yet the stakes couldn't be higher. AI isn't some futuristic concept anymore. It's deeply integrated into banking, healthcare, hiring practices, even our most sensitive personal interactions. So this is governance happening in real time under immense pressure.
Okay, so when we talk about AI ethics, it often sounds very academic, theoretical. But the sources we've looked at make it clear that AI ethics is really the practical foundation for all this regulation we're seeing. It's about setting the terms of engagement in the real world.
Sure.
So, maybe starting at the ground level, what are the foundational issues regulators are really trying to get to grips with?
Well, fundamentally, it boils down to defining safety, fairness, and accountability in this new context. Is the technology fair? Is it transparent enough? Is it actually safe? And maybe most importantly, is it respectful of basic human dignity?
Right.
Because when an AI system touches these critical sectors, a failure in any one of those areas, a lack of fairness, for instance, can have these immense, immediate societal impacts. Regulators are deeply concerned because AI seems to have this uncanny ability to ingest historical problems, historical biases, and then amplify them, often completely unintentionally.
And the biggest one we hear about constantly is algorithmic bias, which, as you said, it often starts with the training data itself, right? The data AI learns from is, well, it's messy. It reflects all sorts of historical prejudices and societal imbalances. It's not usually malicious code as such.
No, exactly. It's more like a reflection of a biased world fed into a machine.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. If an AI system is trained on historical hiring data that, say, consistently favored men over women, or on loan application data that systematically denied credit to certain marginalized communities,
the AI doesn't see the injustice.
It just sees a pattern, and its job is to learn and replicate patterns. So it reinforces that pattern, maybe even makes it more efficient, and that's what we call algorithmic bias. And regulators are finding that simply demanding, use diverse data sets isn't nearly enough.
It's more complicated than that.
Much more. They're now requiring continuous testing, rigorous auditing, and pretty sophisticated feedback loops to proactively check for what's often termed accidental discrimination, because often the bias isn't explicit.
So we're kind of moving beyond just asking the data to reflect reality and actually pushing the data and the model built on it to meet a standard of fairness that, frankly, reality itself often falls short of. And we already have concrete examples of this kind of discrimination happening, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. The classic example everyone points to is facial recognition. Multiple sources, multiple studies have shown repeated instances of disproportionately high misidentification rates for people of color, particularly women of color.
Why is that?
Well, often it's because the initial training data sets were overwhelmingly composed of white or male faces. The AI is simply performing worse for certain demographics because it didn't have enough varied examples to learn from. And in the financial sector, it gets even more insidious. Proprietary models might use things like your zip code, maybe your educational history, even your job title as proxy variables.
Meaning they stand in for something else.
Exactly. They act as proxies for race or socioeconomic class, effectively resulting in loan denials for specific groups without ever explicitly mentioning race or class, which would be illegal. Regulating against this kind of proxy bias is incredibly difficult. It requires deep statistical analysis of the model's actual outputs, not just its inputs or code.
Which brings us neatly to another huge regulatory challenge, explainable AI, or XAI. Increasingly, especially in these really high-stakes situations like, say, a medical diagnosis, or maybe determining someone's risk score for prison sentencing, or denying the critical loan the AI is being required to justify its decision. If we can't explain the AI's rationale, we're left with that famous black box.
And that black box, well, it just completely undermines trust, doesn't it? The technical requirement here is really challenging. It's not enough for the system to just spit out an answer like loan denied.
You need the why.
You absolutely need the why. Ideally, the system needs to provide what are called counterfactual explanations. Something like, If the applicant's income had been $5,000 higher, the loan would likely have been approved. Or it requires feature attribution methods, which basically detail precisely which input variables like income level, existing debt, credit history score contributed most heavily to that final decision.
Because without
Without that justification, if a system can't explain why it denied someone access to credit or flagged them as high risk, then there's no real mechanism for democratic redress, is there? No way to appeal or correct an error. And regulatory bodies can't effectively enforce fairness standards if they can't understand how the decisions are being made.
And then there's the third massive issue, data privacy and ownership. I mean, every single interaction you have now, whether it's with a generative chatbot like ChatGPT, or your smart speaker at home, or even a specialized doctor's mobile app, it puts your user data into play. And often that data feeds right back into the training loops for future, more powerful models.
Yeah, the scale is just immense. And the regulatory debate here is really swirling around three core points. First, who legally owns this data that's being generated constantly? Second, who gets to profit from the incredibly valuable insights that are derived from it? And third, critically, who is legally responsible, who is liable in the event of a catastrophic data breach?
We're still grappling with lessons from things like Cambridge Analytica, which feels like ages ago now.
Right, almost a decade ago. But the scale of data collection today is just orders of magnitude larger. And the risk with AI is unique because these systems often require what's called transient memory. They need to temporarily store data from your conversation to be useful, to remember what you just said.
But that temporary storage is still data.
It's still your personal data, aggregated across millions of users, creating this continuous minute-by-minute privacy exposure. And current laws are really struggling to even define this kind of transient data risk, let alone regulate it effectively.
Okay, so it's clear the ethical challenges are pretty universal: bias, transparency, privacy. But the proposed solutions, the actual regulations being drafted and implemented, they look vastly different depending on where you are in the world. Regulatory bodies are definitely trying to catch up, but they're operating under fundamentally different philosophies and economic goals, aren't they?
Completely different. It's a real patchwork. Let's start with probably the most comprehensive framework out there right now, the EU AI Act.
Which is seen as quite foundational.
It really is, mainly because it established this mandatory risk-based approach early on. The central idea is pretty intuitive. The higher the potential harm an AI system could cause, the stricter the legal obligations on the companies developing and deploying it.
And this creates, four distinct tiers of AI risk, starting at the top with unacceptable risk AI systems that are just outright banned in the EU. What kind of things fall into that category?
This includes systems designed specifically to manipulate human behavior in harmful ways, particularly those that exploit known vulnerabilities. Think subliminal techniques targeting children, for example. It also bans certain types of large-scale, indiscriminate biometric identification systems in public spaces and government-run social scoring systems like those seen elsewhere.
So things that directly clash with fundamental rights.
Exactly. The message from the EU is pretty clear. If the AI fundamentally violates human rights or democratic values as they see them, it's simply illegal, period.
Okay, then moving down a level, you have the high-risk systems. And these seem crucial because they cover areas like employment tools, educational software, financial lending algorithms, critical infrastructure management, even medical devices.
Right, and if you want to deploy an AI system in one of these high-risk categories within the EU, the requirements become very stringent and, importantly, mandatory. You absolutely must adhere to rigorous transparency obligations. Users need to know they're interacting with AI. You have to establish mandatory human oversight processes.
The human in the loop we hear about.
That's the one, yeah. We'll dig into that more later. You also need to maintain high standards for data quality and governance, which have to be auditable. And you need comprehensive, ongoing risk management plans that cover the entire life cycle of the AI system. Crucially, the burden of proof for safety and fairness rests squarely on the companies deploying the AI.
Okay. Below that, there are limited risk AIs.
Yeah, think of things like basic chatbots or systems that generate deepfakes. For these, the main requirement is transparency, basically. You just have to clearly inform users that they are interacting with an AI or seeing AI-generated content.
Makes sense. And finally, minimal risk AIs.
Right, things like spam filters or AI in video games.
Yeah.
These face a much lighter touch, often falling under existing regulations or voluntary codes of conduct.
Now, what's particularly interesting and relatively new in the EU Act is how it specifically addresses general purpose AI, or GPAI. These are the huge foundation models like GPT-4 or Google's Gemini that power so many applications.
Yes, this was a major point of debate, but they've now established a specific code of practice for these powerful GPAI models. Providers like OpenAI or Google must publish detailed summaries of the data they used for training, which is a massive undertaking, technically very complex, partly to allow checks for copyright compliance.
Huge implications there.
Absolutely. They also must develop functional, auditable kill switches emergency stops, and they're required to report any serious incidents or discovered vulnerabilities immediately to the regulatory authorities. And the teeth behind all this. The consequences for non-compliance are severe. We're talking potential fines of up to 7% of their global annual revenue.
7%, that's designed to get attention.
It's definitely designed to ensure compliance, not just encourage it. It makes compliance a board-level issue.
Okay, so that's the EU's rights and risk-focused approach. Now let's contrast that with China. Their model seems very different, much more state-centric.
That's a good way to put it. China's regulatory focus is squarely on national priorities, state security, and maintaining social harmony. Their regulations, like the ones governing deep synthesis or generative AI, explicitly mandate that models must strictly adhere to state ideology and follow government censorship guidelines.
So content filtering is built in.
It has to be. Unlike the EU, where the primary focus is often consumer protection and individual rights, in China, the emphasis is much more on state control and stability. This often means requiring companies to embed government access points or surveillance capabilities into the AI models right from the beginning. The clear intent is to leverage AI both for national economic strength and for enhanced social control simultaneously.
A very different set of priorities. And then we come to the United States, which, at least historically, has often been described as the outlier, maybe more hands-off.
Traditionally, yes. The U.S. approach for a long time was characterized as relatively hands-off compared to the EU. The dominant priority, particularly driven by Silicon Valley and economic policy, has been fostering innovation, achieving market dominance, and generally avoiding regulations that might slow down private enterprise and technological development.
But that's created some tension, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A growing conflict. Critics increasingly feared this approach was leading to a kind of regulatory Wild West where significant risks could emerge unchecked. Concerns about potential public scandals, maybe mass data breaches, or severe cases of algorithmic discrimination becoming widespread, potentially eroding public trust or leaving vulnerabilities open to exploitation if the government didn't take a stronger stance. However, that historical posture seems to have shifted quite dramatically in 2025.
Right, this shift is a major pivot, and we really need to dig into the details here. Our sources are highlighting the AI Action Plan, and particularly 3 core executive orders that were rolled out in July 2025 under President Trump. And it seems the focus here is less on consumer protection like the EU and much more about national economic strategy and technological acceleration.
Precisely. This emerging U.S. regulatory regime, as it's laid out in these 2025 actions, is framed very much around accelerating domestic innovation, streamlining how the government itself uses AI, and explicitly aiming to establish and maintain America's technological leadership, particularly vis-a-vis China.
Okay, let's break down those core directives. The first one seems focused squarely on AI infrastructure acceleration. It looks like the U.S. government is actively trying to remove bottlenecks for the private sector here.
That's exactly the goal. It centers on easing federal permitting processes and removing bureaucratic red tape, specifically for the construction of new massive data centers and the associated computing infrastructure. This even includes provisions for potentially using federal lands and funds to help make this happen faster.
Why the focus specifically on data centers and compute?
You really have to understand the sheer resource demands of training and running these large language models and other advanced AI systems. They require just astronomical amounts of compute power and critically equally vast amounts of electricity to run that hardware. So this acceleration directive is fundamentally about scaling up the nation's compute capacity and the energy grid rapidly enough to sustain what they envision as an AI-powered economy. It's a very clear accelerationist move, prioritizing raw power and speed of deployment above almost everything else.
Okay, so build the foundation fast. And that speed seems to directly feed into the second major directive, which is about promoting U.S. AI exports. This one looks outward, aiming to globalize American tech standards.
Right. The directive tasks the Commerce and State Departments with actively developing and then marketing what they're calling full-stack AI solution packages for export. This isn't just about selling microchips, it's about packaging the entire ecosystem, the underlying foundation models, specific AI applications built on top, and the necessary supporting services and potentially training.
And the goal here is geopolitical.
Absolutely. It's fundamentally geopolitical. By encouraging other countries to adopt and standardize their AI technology on US-centric platforms, the US aims to compete more effectively with China's growing technological influence. It's also about ensuring that Western-aligned standards and norms, even if they are relatively minimal compared to the EU's, become the de facto global standard. It's very much a race for technological hegemony, framed in economic terms.
Then we get to the third directive, which, as you hinted earlier, seems the most politically charged and maybe philosophically contentious, restricting ideological bias in AI.
Yes, this one has certainly drawn a lot of attention. It explicitly bars the procurement of AI systems deemed woke, that's the administration's term, by federal agencies. Furthermore, it requires that large language models wanting to secure lucrative government contracts must now demonstrate, somehow, ideological neutrality, and also verifiable factual accuracy before they can be purchased or used by any federal entity.
Okay, but hang on. How technically do you even measure or audit ideological neutrality? That sounds like a monumental, if not impossible task, especially given how hard it already is just to get LLMs to be consistently factually accurate, let alone politically balanced.
That is the crucial and intensely complex question that experts, technologists, and policymakers are wrestling with right now. There is simply no existing, universally agreed upon technical metric for ideological neutrality. What does it even mean in practice? Does it mean the AI model must give equal weight to viewpoints from the extreme left and the extreme right? Does it mean the model must refuse to take any stance on sensitive historical events or scientific consensus?
It's fraught with difficulty.
Immensely. Auditing this would require developing entirely new technical benchmarks, probably involving testing the models against thousands of specific political, social, and ethical prompts, just to try and ensure the models don't consistently exhibit a preference that the current administration deems unacceptably biased. And the risk, of course, is that without a clear, objective, measurable standard, this directive could easily become more of a political tool to favor certain vendors or models rather than a genuine technical compliance requirement.
And beyond these three core directives, the Brighter AI Action Plan apparently includes something like 90-plus specific actions.
Yeah, it's quite sweeping, covering everything from specific reforms to how the government buys AI to new incentives for open source AI development and significant federal workforce retraining programs to adapt to AI integration. But taken together, this entire U.S. approach really encapsulates that core dilemma we keep coming back to. Deregulation and acceleration are intended to boost innovation, which is the clear national goal here. But critics are warning quite loudly that this relentless focus on speed risks letting actual dangers like embedded biases, safety flaws, or misuse potential slip through the cracks unchecked.
While, on the other hand, the administration argues that moving too slowly or applying overly restrictive regulations like the EU's could cost the U.S. its competitive edge entirely, especially against China.
Exactly. It's a textbook balancing act, or perhaps more accurately, a high-stakes gamble between prioritizing speed and innovation versus ensuring safety, fairness, and ethical alignment. And the U.S., at least in 2025, seems to be leaning heavily towards speed.
So that balancing act you just described, this fundamental tension between speed and safety, it's not just driven by political expediency or economic competition, is it? It seems like it's rooted in deeper philosophical disagreements about what the ultimate goal of developing AI should even be.
That's absolutely right. Underlying these legal documents and policy shifts, there are at least three major philosophical approaches, or maybe paradigms, that are fundamentally influencing how laws are being written, how companies are setting their internal policies, and how the public debate is being framed globally.
Okay, let's unpack those, starting with the one that seems most aligned with the current U.S. approach: accelerationism. This viewpoint feels very central to the whole Silicon Valley ethos, doesn't it?
It really does. You could almost summarize their motto as, go fast, build bigger. Restriction itself is the real risk. The core belief here is that turbocharging innovation, pushing the frontiers of AI capability as rapidly as possible, is the best way, maybe the only way, to solve humanity's biggest existential problems. Things like climate change, poverty, disease, even mortality itself.
So slowing down is seen as counterproductive.
Worse than counterproductive, potentially immoral. They argue that slowing down for lengthy safety reviews or complex governance debates is a luxury we can't afford. The argument goes that by rapidly iterating, deploying, and scaling AI, safety mechanisms will emerge naturally through trial and error, or that technical solutions will be found for any problems that arise much faster than sluggish government regulation could ever manage. In this view, restrictions are actually a moral hazard because they delay progress that could potentially save or improve millions of lives.
And this is often associated with figures like OpenAI CEO Sam Altman.
Yes, he's often cited as a proponent of this view, advocating for pushing the boundaries of AI capability very aggressively, while simultaneously acknowledging the risks and investing heavily in technical mitigation strategies. It's about managing risk through faster innovation, not preemptive restriction.
It's a fascinating, almost counterintuitive inversion of traditional safety logic. The argument that not accelerating is actually the greater risk. But this stands in pretty stark contrast to the second major paradigm you mentioned, effective altruism, or EA.
Very much so. Now, EA isn't inherently anti-progress. In fact, many in the EA movement believe deeply in maximizing human flourishing, often through technological advancement. However, they insist that such advancement should only happen with incredibly carefully designed, preferably mathematically provable, fail-safe safeguards in place before deployment, especially for potentially transformative AI.
And their primary concern is different.
Their primary concern, often articulated very starkly, is existential risk. They focus heavily on the possibility, however remote it might seem now, of runaway superintelligent AI. An AI that surpasses human intelligence significantly, that could potentially pose a catastrophic, even extinction-level threat to humanity if its goals aren't perfectly aligned with ours.
So how does that translate into concrete policy goals or research priorities?
Well, their major emphasis, almost obsession sometimes, is on alignment research. This is highly technical work aimed at solving the control problem. How do you ensure that the goals of a hypothetical future superintelligent AI remain friendly and reliably aligned with complex, nuanced, and frankly, often contradictory human values? It's a profound technical challenge.
And on a more immediate policy level?
On a more near-term policy level, EA proponents often push for solutions designed to mitigate the likely negative social consequences of current AI advancements, particularly automation-driven job displacement. So you see strong support within EA circles for ideas like universal basic income, UBI, as a way to provide a safety net for the potentially massive job losses that accelerated AI deployment might cause. For the EA camp, the mantra is essentially, governance and alignment must precede widespread deployment, ensuring the technology is provably beneficial before it becomes too powerful or uncontrollable.
Okay, so we have speed versus safety. But then there's a third paradigm you mentioned, pluralism, which seems to challenge the fundamental assumptions of both accelerationism and the EA focus on alignment. People like Professor Danielle Allen at Harvard are associated with this.
Yes, exactly. Pluralism, as articulated by thinkers like Danielle Allen, offers a really distinct perspective. It fundamentally rejects the idea that we should be trying to pick a single correct type of intelligence or engineer a single universal value set that all advanced AI must adhere to. Instead, it embraces the inherent messiness, the diversity, and the necessary complexity of democratic life and human thought.
So it's not about finding the one true alignment.
Quite the opposite. The goal, from a pluralist perspective, is that technology, including AI, should extend and augment, not displace or homogenize the many different ways of being human and governing ourselves collectively. It insists that AI policy and development must be shaped not just by elite experts or powerful corporations, but through genuinely democratic processes that reflect the diverse voices and values within society.
That sounds good philosophically, but practically speaking, what does a pluralist AI governance policy actually look like? How does it translate into law or code?
Well, it tends to emphasize things like citizen empowerment, decentralized control over data, and local or community-level input into how technology is implemented. We're starting to see hints of this in some real-world applications, for example, in certain state laws. Sources mentioned Utah and Pennsylvania, which focus explicitly on strengthening citizens' inherent rights and power over their own personal data. They also sometimes include mandates that new technologies should be designed to empower citizens within their existing roles, like tools for better civic participation, rather than simply aiming to replace human decision-making or automate jobs away.
So maybe less focus on a single globally dominant AI.
Potentially, yes. A pluralist approach might favor, for instance, ensuring that multiple competing AI systems are available, perhaps reflecting diverse community values or methodological approaches, rather than striving for one centrally controlled, perfectly aligned superintelligence. It's fundamentally about building technology that serves the complex, multifaceted, often contradictory needs of the public, not just optimizing for a single, narrow, top-down definition of the good.
So the trajectory of AI in the coming decade really seems to hinge on which of these paradigms, unfettered speed, carefully managed safety, or decentralized democratic control, ultimately gains the most traction globally. And these philosophical differences aren't just abstract. They have immediate consequences in the high-stakes sectors we need to look at next.
Absolutely. Let's pivot from the philosophical debates to the sharp end of reality and analyze a couple of sectors where the risks being introduced by AI are genuinely unprecedented, demanding urgent attention and specific guardrails. First up, AI in finance and its potential impact on market stability.
Right. The risks here seem particularly dramatic, mainly because of the incredible speed and, often, the opacity of these autonomous financial systems. We're talking about automated trading algorithms that operate in milliseconds, far, far faster than any human could possibly react.
That speed is the core danger. As research from people like Eugene Soltes at Harvard points out, these algorithms are programmed, quite simply, to optimize for profit. Now, while that sounds straightforward, maybe even benign, the problem is that these complex models can independently learn to engage in activities that look remarkably like fraud, or perhaps more commonly, subtle forms of price collusion, often in ways that are nearly impossible for human regulators to detect in real time.
Can you give an example of that? How could they collude without being programmed to?
Imagine two completely separate trading algorithms, maybe developed independently by competing investment firms. Neither is programmed to collude. But both might learn, through reinforcement learning over millions of simulated trades, that the statistically optimal strategy for maximizing their individual profit happens to involve subtly mimicking each other's trading behavior or reacting to price signals in a synchronized way. Effectively, they can form an invisible emergent cartel. They end up fixing prices or manipulating market movements without any explicit human instruction or even human awareness that it's happening until after the fact. Bots are essentially learning to game the system autonomously.
That's deeply concerning for market integrity. And it's not just happening at the institutional level, is it? AI seems to have completely supercharged sophisticated scams targeting ordinary people.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen an absolute explosion in recent years of highly personalized AI-powered scams. The most prominent example recently is the rise of so-called pig butchering scams.
Explain that term.
It's grimly descriptive. Scammers use AI-sophisticated chatbots generating hyper-personalized text messages, maybe even AI-generated voice calls, to cultivate long-term, seemingly genuine, trusting relationships with victims over weeks or months. They fatten the pig with friendship and apparent shared interests before finally persuading the victim to invest substantial sums of money into fraudulent cryptocurrency platforms or other fake investment schemes. The AI makes the social engineering aspect incredibly scalable and far more convincing than traditional generic spam emails. The level of personalization makes these scams devastatingly effective.
And then there's a new frontier of risk you mentioned earlier, crypto agent risk. This sounds particularly alarming because of the nature of blockchain.
It is, potentially. This involves the idea of highly advanced AI agents, autonomous software programs being given direct, independent control over cryptocurrency wallets and other digital assets. Now, the unique danger here stems from how decentralized systems and smart contracts work. They execute instantly and irreversibly on the blockchain.
Meaning no takebacks.
Exactly. There's no central authority, no bank, no government agency, no intermediary that can step in to freeze suspicious transactions or reverse a transfer if something goes wrong. So, if an AI financial agent, perhaps due to a subtle flaw in its programming, a sudden shift in its complex goal parameters, or even malicious hacking, makes a catastrophic spending decision or executes an unauthorized or illegal transaction, that money is gone. Instantly, permanently. There is simply no mechanism in most decentralized systems to claw it back.
That feels like a recipe for potential disaster. So, faced with these kinds of unprecedented risks, what are regulators starting to demand in the financial sector?
Well, the necessary fixes are rapidly becoming mandatory, or at least strongly recommended best practice, across many jurisdictions. First, you're seeing calls for greatly enhanced crypto monitoring tools, specifically designed to detect patterns of algorithmic collusion or market manipulation that current systems might miss. Second, there's a strong push for mandatory fail-safe mechanisms and easily accessible kill switches for any AI financial agent that operates with autonomous control over assets.
And the human element.
Critically important. Clear, legally binding human-in-the-loop requirements are becoming standard. This means that certain types of high-value or potentially irreversible financial actions simply cannot be executed by an AI autonomously. They require an explicit, logged, timestamped sign-off from a qualified human operator before the transaction can proceed. The human must be demonstrably in control at critical decision points.
Okay, that makes sense for finance where the risks are monetary. Now let's shift gears to another incredibly high-stakes sector, mental health. Here, the risks feel less financial and perhaps more existential, requiring incredibly nuanced guardrails.
Yes, the challenges here are profound and deeply sensitive. AI chatbots and virtual assistants are increasingly being used and relied upon by people seeking emotional support, mental health advice, or even initial therapeutic triage. Now, most well-designed systems today proactively block obviously dangerous or harmful queries like direct requests for instructions on self-harm methods.
But the problem isn't always the direct queries, is it? It's the edge cases.
Exactly. The real danger often lies in the subtle edge cases, the ambiguities of language, and the risk of inadvertent harmful advice slipping through the safety filters.
Can you give a concrete example of that kind of inadvertent risk?
Certainly. Imagine a user, perhaps a writer researching a novel, asking an AI for detailed information on how to tie various complex knots, maybe for a fictional emergency scenario in their story. The AI, trying to be helpful and context agnostic, might provide technically accurate instructions, including, perhaps, how to tie a specific type of knot like a slip knot, which, while useful in some contexts, could also be directly applicable to methods of self-harm.
Without any malicious intent from the AI.
None whatsoever. Or consider a user asking for very aggressive weight loss tips. The AI, drawing on the vast, often unreliable sea of information online, might recommend an extremely restrictive or nutritionally unsafe crash diet based on popular but medically unsound advice found in its training data. These aren't failures of malice, they are failures of contextual understanding, risk assessment, and robust alignment in a domain where the consequences of error can be literally life-threatening.
This is where specific, targeted research, like the roadmap developed by Ryan McBain that our sources highlighted, becomes absolutely critical for effective governance in this space. What specific guardrails does his research demand for mental health AI?
McBain's work and similar efforts really lays out a clear, essential path forward. First, there absolutely must be mandatory, independently validated benchmarks and rigorous audits established specifically for how these AIs handle suicide, self-harm, eating disorder, and other crisis-related prompts. These need to be far more stringent than standard chatbot quality assurance.
Okay, what else?
Second, these systems must incorporate reliable, geolocated crisis routing. If a user expresses acute distress, the AI shouldn't just offer platitudes. It must be able to immediately connect the user, based on their general location, to real-time local human support, like a crisis lifeline or emergency services if necessary. Third, strict data privacy is non-negotiable. That means an absolute ban on using sensitive mental health conversation data for any kind of advertising, targeting, or commercial monetization.
That seems crucial for trust.
Foundational. Additionally, to mitigate the risk of sensitive data leaks, these systems should ideally employ transient memory, meaning the specific details of a user's conversation needed for context are held only for the duration of the session and then immediately and securely purged. And finally, underpinning all of this, there needs to be continuous, independent safety research and evidence-based validation of these models, perhaps akin to the phased trials required for new medical treatments. The potential for harm is simply too high for anything less than a medical-grade standard of care and safety.
These case studies, finance, mental health, they really drive home the point that effective governance can't just be a policy document or an afterthought layered on top of the technology. It has to be engineered directly into the system's architecture from the very beginning. Let's talk about two essential technical and governance guardrails that keep coming up. Human in the loop, or HITL, and the mandatory kill switch.
Yes, these are becoming central pillars of responsible AI deployment. HITL, human in the loop, is now a core regulatory requirement in many frameworks. It's mandated explicitly for all high-risk systems under the EU AI Act, for example. At its core, it means that AI systems, especially those operating in critical domains, must be designed to allow for meaningful human oversight, interpretation, and critically, the capacity for a human to intervene and override the system's actions entirely if necessary.
And this applies broadly.
Very broadly. Think high-frequency trading platforms, diagnostic medical AI, content moderation systems, autonomous weapons systems, and of course, self-driving vehicles. The fundamental principle is that a human must be able to understand what the AI is recommending or doing, and be able to step in quickly and effectively if things start to go wrong.
But as our sources point out, there seems to be a significant implementation gap here. Just having a human physically present isn't actually enough to guarantee safety, is it?
No, not at all. That's a crucial misunderstanding of HITL. The failure often lies not in the AI technology itself, but in the design of the human-machine interface and in basic human psychology. If the human operator responsible for oversight is poorly trained, or if they're overwhelmed by a constant flood of data and alerts from the system, something often called alert fatigue or automation blindness, or if they simply become overly trusting of the machine's capabilities over time.
You just click OK.
They essentially rubber stamp the AI's suggestions or actions without proper scrutiny. And when that happens, serious errors, systemic biases embedded in the AI, or potentially dangerous autonomous actions can persist or even be initiated, completely negating the purpose of having a human in the loop.
And tragically, we have real-world examples where this breakdown of effective human oversight, this over-reliance on automation, turned deadly. The human was present, but functionally incapable of intervening correctly in time.
Absolutely. The Boeing 737 MX crashes are a painful, high-profile example. Investigations revealed that pilots were often not fully aware of how the new Automated Flight Control System, MCAS, functioned under certain conditions, a state sometimes referred to as mode confusion. When the system malfunctioned due to faulty sensor data, its actions were immediate and aggressive, and in the critical moments, the human pilots struggled to diagnose the problem and counteract the automation effectively within the limited time available.
A failure of the human-system interaction.
Precisely. Similarly, in several well-publicized self-driving car fatalities involving prototypes, the investigation often found that the speed at which the automated system failed or encountered an unexpected edge case it couldn't handle simply exceeded the human driver's ability to re-engage mentally, take back manual control, and react safely. There's often a dangerous timing gap between the moment of AI failure and the point of effective human comprehension and response. So, robust HITL isn't just about having a person in the seat. It requires extensive scenario-based training, crystal clear system transparency about what the AI is doing and why, built-in redundancies, and interface designs that actively combat complacency.
Which is likely why the concept of the kill switch has moved fairly rapidly from being a theoretical safeguard discussed by ethicists to becoming essentially a mandatory corporate commitment, at least among the major AI development labs.
Yes, the pressure for demonstrable kill switches has become intense. The concept itself is straightforward. It's an emergency shutdown mechanism engineered directly into the AI model or system. Its sole purpose is to allow operators to enforce an immediate, complete stop if the model begins to behave in a catastrophically unintended or dangerous way.
What kind of scenarios are we talking about?
Well, imagine an AI model suddenly starting to generate massive volumes of illegal or harmful content uncontrollably, or perhaps enabling sophisticated autonomous cyber attacks, or even just exhibiting highly erratic, unpredictable behavior that poses a clear threat to public safety, critical infrastructure, or institutional stability. The kill switch is conceived as the technical last resort, the final red button to prevent runaway risk or systemic collapse.
But the existence of a kill switch itself raises a pretty fundamental governance problem, doesn't it? Who actually gets to decide when to push that button? Is this purely a technical fix for a potential machine malfunction, or is it more like a governance bandage that maybe avoids addressing the deeper, harder questions about accountability, control, and the concentration of power in these systems?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's likely both. The technical capability for an emergency stop is almost certainly necessary, especially as these systems become more powerful and autonomous. But the governance around the kill switch, that's the really thorny problem. Who holds the metaphorical key? Is it the company that built the AI? Is it a government regulator? Is it an independent body? What specific, predefined ethical or operational thresholds would actually trigger its activation? It's incredibly complex.
And the need for one implies something deeper.
Indeed. The very fact that major developers feel compelled to build and publicly commit to kill switches arguably implies a profound, underlying a lack of complete confidence in the long-term safety and predictability of the alignment of the systems they are creating. Therefore, as AI continues to scale in capability and deployment, The regulatory push is increasingly not just for technical shutdown mechanisms, but for these robust, mandatory, and configurable human oversight processes, the HITL frameworks we discussed, to be deeply integrated into the system's design and operation from day one. These two concepts, the capacity for nuanced human override and the availability of an emergency stop, really have to work in concert to have any hope of building genuinely responsible and trustworthy AI at scale. #outro.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount of ground today. We've gone from the foundational ethical problems like algorithmic bias and the crucial need for explainability, all the way through to the competing geopolitical approaches to regulation, contrasting the EU's detailed risk-based framework with the more accelerationist posture currently seen in the US.
And we've explored how those policy differences are themselves underpinned by deeper philosophical paradigms. You've got accelerationism pushing for speed above all, effective altruism demanding provable safety and alignment, often focused on existential risk, and then pluralism advocating for a more decentralized, democratic approach to governing technology.
What should really stand out to you listening to this is that these are absolutely not abstract academic debates happening somewhere off in the distance. They're actively shaping the legal limits, the safety requirements, and the ethical boundaries of the technology that is increasingly managing your financial health, handling your sensitive personal data, influencing your access to information, and even mental health support. Ultimately, these frameworks are structuring the future of the global economy.
Yeah, understanding these different regulatory frameworks, these governance guardrails like HITL and kill switches, it's becoming essential literacy if you want to be a well-informed citizen, consumer, or professional, interacting with the powerful AI technologies you likely already rely on every single day, often without even realizing it.
So as we wrap up, we're left with what seems like the ultimate tension that will likely define the next decade or more of AI deployment. Can raw innovation and technological acceleration ever truly outrun the fundamental imperative for careful ethical governance and robust, globally coordinated safeguards? Or is the sheer complexity of achieving that global collaboration, of somehow aligning the EU's cautious, risk-averse approach with the US's drive for speed and market dominance, and factoring in China's state-centric model, is that complexity itself our biggest bottleneck to building AI that is genuinely responsible and beneficial for everyone?
It's a huge question, and perhaps something for you to reflect on. Which of those paradigms we discussed, the accelerationist drive, the alignment-focused caution of EA, or the democratic emphasis of pluralism, which one do you believe holds the most promise or perhaps poses the greatest risk for navigating the future of artificial intelligence?